Okay, good morning. So we're here for session 2 of the Job Search Strategy webinar series, and it was really exciting to just hear from some participants that some of the things we covered last week are really useful, and they do make a big difference to you when you update your resume and do it in a certain format. It makes a really big difference to the reader. It's always all about the reader and what their needs are and what they're trying to find out. So today we will keep moving. Get my little page turner going. So last week we spoke about knowing your value, and that is really understanding yourself really well. It means knowing what your skill sets are that are useful in the marketplace. And sometimes it's things that we maybe have never been paid for before, but we happen to be really good at them. They are of as much value to an employer as the things that you have been paid to implement in the workplace before. And like I said last week, particularly if you've been a business owner, you've gathered so many skills and so much knowledge and experience and attitude and ability to overcome problems and think through ways of marketing the business that, you know, if you added those skills to a business owner's staff, you know, he or she would be probably very thrilled to have you. So I think we undervalue ourselves when we have been in business ourselves, and when we decide to find another job. All of that experience is really marketable. And last week we also talked about improving resumes, and I went through a format that makes your page 1 of your resume really a clear overview of who you are and what you offer. And that works really well because the reader doesn't have to try and go through your resume and find the information. It's right there in page 1. And the resume, as we've talked about, is really just a vehicle to get you to a conversation, which might be over the phone first up, or it may be face-to-face interview. Okay, so moving on. Just to recap, I forgot to put that slide in there. Just to recap, the resume sections we spoke about last week, which will be found in the film or the video of the webinar, which is up on YouTube. The resume section is on page 1, your profile, which is a summary of you, your key capabilities, your qualifications, if they're relevant, your career summary, the jobs you've had, and then from pages 2 onwards, 2, 3, 4, your employment history, and include your achievement statements. And we talked about that last week as well. Okay, so what are we doing today? We are looking at cover letters, and we're going to touch on the hidden job market and how to locate opportunities. So just to recap where cover letters fit in the whole scheme of things, generally speaking, if you are applying for a position, say through an advertisement, an advertised role, the general run of things is to write a cover letter plus a resume, and always 2 separate documents. Your cover letters should be a separate document. A cover letter, which is kind of the mini version of who you are and what you do. So a cover letter is what somebody will read first up to see whether they should pursue further and read your resume, and then from the resume it should lead to a conversation in some shape or form. So cover letters, if you're applying online, generally speaking, will still be, you know, update or upload your resume and your cover letter separately as Word documents. Another alternative situation which may happen is that you might be referred to somebody who has got a vacant position, but it's been a referral. So they might say to you, well, here, just send your resume to this person. Here's their email address. Email your resume to that person. Always, always, always take the time to turn your email into a cover letter. Don't just attach a resume. So I'll get this right. Sorry. Don't just attach a resume to your email and just write, "Oh, Joe said to send you my resume. Here it is." That's too blasé. It's like you couldn't be bothered to take your time to put any effort into it. It's just an indication of the way you apply for a job is an indication of the way you will do a job. That's how I see it anyway. If somebody's too lazy to write a proper cover letter, they're probably too lazy to do the job right if they were to get a job. So just keep the job search process is an indication of the way you will do anything. So Cover letter may then be a Word document that you attach to an application, or it may simply be what you write in your email when you send it to somebody. So just keep that in mind. So we'll start now looking at cover letters. So the guidelines as to how to, how it should look. As I said last week, if you are attaching a cover letter, just use Word doc to produce it. Keep it simple, keep it clean design. It doesn't have to be fancy. And the fonts, use nice simple fonts that we talked about last week. And one thing I said last week was, if you're sending a cover letter and a resume, use the same font for both, because then it looks like they belong together. Also, I don't think I mentioned last week, but it's a good idea to add a footer onto the cover letter and the resume, and just in the footer put your name. So it might be Bev Ryan, cover letter, and then dash, and then I would put the job I'm applying for, so administration assistant. And then on the resume, on the footer, I'd put Bev Ryan, cover letter, dash, administration assistant. So they can see, if they get separated, people can see that they belong together again. So the footers are a really good idea to use. And again, always check spelling. That should be a given. Okay, so again, I use a really simple format for cover letters, and similar to the format I showed you last week for resumes. Cover letters, generally speaking, should not be longer than a page. They don't need to be longer than a page. The only time that that's not the case is if you're applying for a government job. And I'll talk a bit more about that after we finish cover letters, because they're slightly different. But generally speaking, if you're applying for a general job and it says attach cover letter, it doesn't need to be more than a page. And once you've got this format down pat, you'll find it easier to write because there is structure to it. It's nothing worse than having to write something without structure. It's like you've got no idea what you're supposed to do. So this format works really well. So the top of let's get my pointer. Turn my pointer on. Okay, so at the top, and I will show an example of this later on this morning. Your contact details at the top, as if you are writing a normal letter. Then I would put the company details that you're applying for. You may not have a name, but you can certainly put, Zoom Corporation or Recruitment Manager, Zoom Corporation. And then I'd always put the job title after that, administration assistant, whatever. So again, if somebody finds it, if it's been printed out at their workplace and somebody finds it, they can see which job it is. They may have advertised 5 jobs at the same time, so you need to really make it clear which job you're applying for. Then in the letter, really it's got 3 parts. A strong opening paragraph that contains an overview of kind of who you are and what you offer. It's kind of similar to that opening paragraph that I talked about on top of your resume. It shouldn't be word for word, but it will be quite similar, because obviously you're the same person, so the information is going to be pretty similar. But this time in a cover letter you use proper sentences, whereas in the resume you can use shortened sentences that aren't grammatically a correct sentence, but you can use that kind of clipped language in a resume, whereas in a cover letter you always use proper sentences, proper grammar. Then in the middle section of your cover letter, it's a good idea to use bullet points which relate back to the actual job description, and I'll go into more detail with this in a moment. So the middle part of your cover letter should be a group of bullet points. It is okay to use bullet points in cover letters. It's perfectly normal. From a reader's point of view, what bullet points do, it enables the reader to get that information quickly. They don't have to read long sentences. Like they've got this little list it's like a list. There it is, boom, 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 one under the other. And as I'll explain shortly, each point on that list should match across to one of the requirements of the job that's been advertised. And then just simple closing paragraph. It doesn't have to be complicated. You just simply say, I'm available for interview at your convenience, blah, blah, blah. It can be as simple as that. And just sign off, yours sincerely. So with the cover letters, it's, as I said, once you kind of get the hang of that format, it makes your job quite easy. And if you're applying for similar jobs one after the other, you won't need to change your cover letter much, but you would always check your cover letter before you send it to make sure it is directed particularly at the particular job you're applying for. Don't just have a generic one that you never change. That's the worst thing that can happen when you're applying for jobs. If you're sending a generic cover letter resume off to different jobs, when people receive them, they can see that. They can sort of see, oh, this looks so generic. They haven't even taken the time to make this, to address this job that we're advertising. And again, what that says to them is that you can't be bothered to do that, which is an indication of, that's how they will see that. Well, if they can't be bothered to do this right, they probably can't be bothered to do the job right. So it might sound a bit harsh, but that's what, because when you think about, if somebody's advertised a role and they need someone to fill a job, but they've been forced to put an ad on Seek because they haven't found anybody, and we'll talk more about this later. That's kind of a last resort for many companies, is to put an advertisement on Seek, and we will cover that. So put an ad on Seek, they might get 100 applicants, and they're not going to read every word of every applicant. They're going to just sort those through. There'll be the crappy applications, there'll be the good applications. That'll be the first division. Crappy pile, good pile. You want to be in the good pile. And then the chances are being narrowed down. So that's why it's really critical to get all of this stuff, to get it right, and just to do it well. There's no one size fits all, but if you've got a format that looks professional and looks like you're taking your time, then your chances are that you'll be in the good application pile. Because believe me, there's a lot of people who write really bad applications. Okay, so now just sort of zeroing in, honing in on cover letters in more detail. So this is what the top section of a cover letter could look like. It's a little bit like a letter format. So at the top, just put your name, put your suburb. There's no need to put your full address. I may have mentioned this last week. With security the way it is now, social media and people's confidential, keeping your private information confidential, just put your suburb. Because what can happen now with a street address, if you put your whole, house number 22 Cavendish Street, Cooperoo or something like that, people can go onto Google and they can find you. They can go on Google Street Search and they can do a virtual walk past your house and look at your house. And you don't want people judging your status based on how your house looks. It can get really weird. Plus, you've got the potential for people to just get that information about you. So suburbs fine. The only time you need to give your personal address is if you actually are offered a job and they need that information when you sign your contract. That's the only time you need to give that. So a phone number and email address and LinkedIn. I'll talk more about LinkedIn in the next webinar next week. If you've got a LinkedIn profile, it's a good idea to put your LinkedIn address there, and as I said, we'll talk more about that then. If you haven't got LinkedIn and it's not really of interest, it doesn't matter, but we will cover that next week. So date, obviously, then that's how I would do the job, which job you're applying for. This is actually from a cover letter that I did for somebody a few years ago. So the job was Data Collection Officer, Department of Health, Brisbane. So that's fairly clear. A lot of government jobs actually have got reference numbers. You could add the reference number on there at the end as well, and you could put the reference number in the footer at the bottom if you wanted to. Now, this is the opening paragraph that is really critical for your cover letter. Now, I'm using this one as an example because this is somebody he'd had 21 years in one of the major banks, and he did not want to work in a bank anymore. He wanted to move outside of it. Now, that can be quite difficult, or it may feel like it's difficult. So if you say, well, look, I've just worked in the bank for 20 years, how can I get a job in anywhere else apart from a bank? Well, that's when you just need to drill down to the skill sets you've got, because that's what you're selling. It's not the fact you've worked in the bank, it's the fact that you've got certain skills and you use those skills in the bank. Now you can use the same skills in a different environment. Now, when we talked about all the different things he did in a bank, and he worked in a call centre for most of that time. I think he did some work in branches as well and head office as well, but his most recent role was in a call centre. Everything you do in a bank, particularly when you're doing customer service, it's all data collection, data entry. Every conversation you have, you're logging into computer systems and into customer information. You're changing data in the system. You're adding notes that you've had that conversation and follow-up notes. So he really enjoyed the data side of the job, and not just customer information, but also generating reports at the end of the month and turning this based on data that was collected from the system. So when you talk about data collection, then there's other jobs. There's lots of jobs around in other companies where they have very large databases of customers, and the data has to be collected accurately, and records have to be pulled to make decisions for future implementation of plans. So that's really what he wanted to do. So we found some jobs like that. So this is how we kind of crossed over from banking to data collection. So after 21 years experience within a highly regulated environment of a major national bank, where data collection is integral to successful operations, and where I won awards for accurate data collection and records, I am very keen to continue specialising in a data collection role within your organisation. So you can see that's kind of done the transition from banking to data. The reason we mentioned here highly regulated environment, because most companies that have this sort of role around data collection, they've got so many government regulations and policies and rules and things that they have to comply with. So it was important that to show that he had that knowledge. He was used to working in that sort of environment. National was a good word to use, national bank, because he was applying to go into large companies which had national, national base. What else? He had won awards, so we threw that in. This is kind of where I won awards for accurate data collection. This is kind of line 3 of his whole application, so we put that in right at the top because that's relevant. I'm keen to continue specialising in a data collection role within your organisation. So that's a really nice opening paragraph. It's very strong. I never ever use that, I wish to apply for the advertised role. I mean, it's just a waste of space, because that's what you're doing. You don't have to kind of beg. It's not, oh, can I please apply? So here's my letter. It's like, yep, here's my letter. This is the job. Straight into 21 years experience, tick, major, highly regulated environment, tick, national company, tick, data collection, tick, won awards, tick, specialising, tick, data collection. Yeah, so it's all there in paragraph 1. So that's how your cover letter should start, a really powerful statement. And with this comment here, 21 years, I may have covered on this last week, but you can add years of experience together. Now, particularly if you've had a career where you've done bits and pieces, and I've had one of those myself. I've done bits and pieces of publishing book magazines and books. I've done bits and pieces of career transition work. I've done bits and pieces of some business communication work. Now, and I have done this in my resume. I've sat down and I've just calculated, well, if I add up all the bits and pieces to publishing, how many years is that? And it's something like 20 years. If I add up bits and pieces of career coaching, how many years is that? It's probably something like about 15 years. So, you can claim that and say, well, I've got 20 years of experience in business management. And that 20 years may have been scattered over a couple of different little bits and pieces. Add them together, and that's your experience. So that's really a good thing to do if you're coming back into or trying to get a role after having what you feel is like a bits and pieces approach to a career. Just bring it all together. It's your job to bring it together and present it to them as a powerful statement. Okay. Moving on. So the next section is the middle of your cover letter. So this is section 2 of your cover letter. Now this is again, this is the same person. Yep, this is the middle of his cover letter. Now, how you figure out, what do you put in the bullet points? Well, the way to figure out what to put in your bullet points is you go back to the advertised role. So I always print them out. If I see an advertisement for a job or I'm working for the client, I'll print out the advertisement and I'll go through, and there'll be some section of that advertisement that will say essential to this role. or you must have something like that. So, and generally they will have that in bullet points. Sometimes they don't, but that's your bullet points, that little list. Then, so if they've got three, it's usually more than three, they might have about 5 essential requirements for the job that you then would address them. Now, I just want to sort of add a caution here. If you read an advertisement for a job and it says highly desirable or must have or highly desirable, and it puts 5 things, and you might read that and there might be one that you just think, oh, maybe I could do that, but I don't have any real experience. Don't then say, oh, but I can't do the job, because that's what women tend to do. We tend to think that unless we've got all 5, then we shouldn't apply. Now, interestingly, men are totally different to us, generally speaking. Usually men, and I've had this conversation a lot of times and it seems to always be true, men will usually say, oh, look, if I've got 3 of the 5 requirements, yeah, sure, I'll apply, because I could learn the other 2 on the job. They're just much more confident about that sort of thing, whereas we women, for some reason, sort of think we have to tick every box before we can even put a hand up to say we can do a job. So if you read the list of what's required in a job, and if it does say something is absolutely essential, so it might say a degree in engineering, for example, is essential. Well, of course it is if you're an engineering position, so it's essential. So you don't apply if you haven't got one. But sometimes it will say something like, you might start to read it and it will say a qualification in this field is required. And then you might keep reading and it might say all relevant experience. So that's fine, You might have, I know I've worked with people who've got 5 or 10 years experience in community services. Now, they've never gone and got a qualification in community services, but they've got feet on the ground experience. And, sorry, whoops, go back speaker. I was just hoping you can still hear me because I realised I was put the speaker back on. Oh, no, it's there, so we're good. So 5 years experience on the ground running something or working in the midst of something is probably more valuable than having a qualification in it, particularly if somebody's just come out from doing a diploma or a degree in something but have never actually worked in the field. So don't ever feel like, oh, I've got years of experience but have not got a qualification. Usually, most people are smart enough now to know that experience is highly valuable. So don't be put off by that sort of thing in a job description. Okay, so going back to this example here. So each of these dot points then matches across to one of the requirements that were listed in the job application. Now, just basing myself on this letter, I'll just see if I can pull out what the requirement would have been. So it would have been call centre experience, I'm sure, based on that. So his real life experience is part of a national network, answering calls from Australia and overseas, responding to customers, internal bankers and processing centres where data is stored during and after every call. Also track targets and results, reporting weekly. No, okay, so that job requirement would have been not just customer service, but it would have been about dealing with data collection on a daily basis. So that's what we were trying to say here, that he's had that experience because of the fact he's worked in a bank, answering calls, responding to customers, storing data. So that's what they're... Speed and accuracy using Microsoft Suite. Yeah, so that's a requirement. Any sort of data operations role is going to require speed and accuracy with the keyboard. So that's what we were addressing there. And these complex in-house CRM and ERM applications. If you worked in a very large organisation which has got a customer database, that's CRM, is customer relationship management tool. Every large organisation has got one. They might all have different names, but they've got software systems that store customer data. So that's what a CRM is. If you ever see that in a job advertisement. Electronic records management, that's a common thing you might see in job advertisements. That's the system used in government offices and large organisations where they convert paperwork into electronic records. So they scan the paperwork, it becomes a PDF or whatever, and then it gets stored in some system. State government uses a system called TRIM. I think SAP is a system used in manufacturing companies. So that's what those refer to. So we're just saying there that he's got that experience. This is a good example as well. You know, you might see a job advertised where it says you need to use a particular computer system. Now, you may not have used that system before, but you might have used other systems that would be quite similar. So you can say, well, I've used XYZ in this job, and therefore I can learn yours quickly on the job, which is what we wrote here. Okay. I think this one was probably some requirement for initiative or innovation, and so we used this example where this guy was part of a team that they developed some innovation system for Westpac, so we used that. Accuracy, again, that was one of the requirements of the job. 100% accuracy ratings for record keeping, and working in teams is always, or not always, but generally is the requirement, able to work in teams, so we used that one there. So that's the middle of his letter. You can see that's just the cover letter. So that's a really, really strong statement. That's a really informative section of the cover letter, because the purpose of a cover letter is to get someone to read the resume. Now, just based on that cover letter, chances are people could see pretty much, yeah, we need to interview this person. That's why those bullet points work so well, and it's not a random collection of facts. It's a collection of facts that match across to what the company's looking for. And I'll just cover the last section, then I'll just unmute and have a quick chat. And then just to finish off the letter, the cover letter. Now, normally I would go straight to here. After the bullet points, I'd normally go in here. I'm available for interview at your convenience and can be reached at. Even though you've got the phone number at the top of your letter, I always put it again at the bottom in case somebody says, oh, here, ring this guy and just circle the phone number. There it is, away you go. Or we added this, like if you want to add a little bit of extra information, you can add it below the dot points, which is what we've done here, below the bullet points. And same guy, same letter. Data collection has always been my preferred activity in the multifaceted roles I've had within banking, and I'm now very keen to discuss this position. I'm also very interested to learn health industry terminology and abbreviations in my time should that be required. So that was just like a little added persuasion that, yes, I can move from banking into Department of Health, you know, and so we just wanted to add that for a bit more convincing. Now, from memory, I think he was invited to interview for this role. Now, I know he did not get this role, but we used a very similar approach for another data entry role in an insurance company, customer service data entry, and he got that. So it didn't take him very long. He moved from banking, which he was quite worried that he wouldn't find another job. So it didn't take him long to be snapped up in another company because he was really good at his job. Okay, so just a moment. I'm just going to unmute you for a moment just to see, are there any questions there about any of that cover letter information?
Yes, Bev, you've got yours sincerely as the salutation down there.
Yes.
Do you prefer yours sincerely, faithfully, or truly, or what?
Yeah, sincerely, I think, generally speaking, used most regularly. It's the world of job search is kind of warming up. You know how it used to be, when I was young, it used to be a very formal process. Like there were very set ways you did things, and you're sincerely or faithfully. I think both of those would have worked. Sincerely seems to be a little bit more. If you think about the word faithful and the word sincere, I think sincere is a more applicable word than faithful. So, but even like sometimes I think people would best regard, so that's probably a bit too informal. So you need to find the balance between too formal and too informal. So just stick with sincerely at this point, you know, at that stage of your conversation where it's you're sending that off to someone you've never met. They've got no idea who you are. Just stick with that word, I think.
Okay, thank you.
And my question is, if you have, like, if they have like a long list of things and you tick most of the boxes, but you don't tick some. So I'm guessing you address that in section 2 of the letter, and you just highlight all the good things that you can bring with regards to their requirements. And then how do you address the bit that you
don't have?
That you don't have, yeah.
You could do something like we did here, and I'm just just trying to remember, one of the requirements may have been an understanding of medical terminology. When it says learn health industry terminology and medical terminology, that may be why we put it in there, because he did not have that, but he's saying that he was willing to get that. He was willing to go and do a course in his own time. So that's, if there's something like that, say it might be some knowledge of something, or use medical terminology, you can do a course, a 2-day course in that, and you've got it. So you would address it under the bullet points. Yeah, you wouldn't put it up the top, because you don't want to give them any reason to. You want to hit them with all the good stuff at the top, so they're thinking, oh, this person sounds good, and then they finally get down here to the bottom section, and they say, oh, okay. But you find a way to say that even though you haven't got that particular knowledge or experience or whatever, that you're willing to get it in some way, shape or form as soon as possible, or that you are in previous roles you've acquired working knowledge within the first 30 days, which is a really, that's quite a normal understanding for companies, just to realise, well, it can take people 30 days to kind of settle into a job. So you might say that, well, I'm really confident I can learn that within the first 30 days, or if I were to take this role, or if I were to be offered this role. So you can address something like that way. Yeah.
So just make a promise.
Well, just say you're confident that you can. Obviously it depends what it is. But I wouldn't worry. Just, if you get to that situation and you're not sure how to address that, I mean, you can always just send me an email. We could have a go at it. But I guess the main point I want to make is, don't be put off. If there's, if there's 1 or 2 things there, that then you just know you'll pick it up, but you can't say you've actually got it. Actually, I've got a slide coming up. It's the next slide that might help come up with some ideas with that. So, all right, so that cover letter, if you put those 3 sections together, then you've got a really good format for a cover letter. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just mute you again just to keep the background noise down. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I put this slide together. I've called it Bridging Gaps. So that's a little bit what we're talking about. How do you, in either your cover letter or in your resume sometimes, how do you bridge a gap from what you've done in the past to where you want to go in the future? And that guy we just looked at there with the application coming out of Westpac into, I think he ended up in insurance, pretty sure it was. That's what we were doing there. We were bridging a gap from one to the other. So I just grabbed some examples here to show you. Now, this person here, this is a young lady I helped a few years ago now, but she graduated with a degree, a Bachelor of Business, specialising in event management. So she wanted to work in event management. She had done some work experience in event management, which is always a good idea. You're not unpaid. I mean, work experience, no, it was probably unpaid, but she'd, as a volunteer, yeah, that's right. So she'd been around events for a while, and she'd gathered, when we sat down and gathered up the time that she had spent working in events and also in customer service, you'll see there we came up with 6 years. So this is a cover letter to apply for a real job as an event manager, or a real job in event management, without actually having a paid job in event management before. And she's the daughter of a friend of mine. Apparently she'd applied for stacks of jobs beforehand and just hadn't got to an interview. So her mum sent me her resume and I just rejigged it a bit. So this is the cover letter. But I have over 6 years of customer service skills plus extensive events work experience plus a Bachelor of Business specialising in event management. So straight up, the things that were needed in most event management or event roles is getting on with people with your customer service plus how to run events. So we're saying, well, she's got 6 years of experience plus a qualification. I offer proven expertise in client liaison, administration, time management and organisational skills while working in key roles on large-scale events. And she had done that. She'd done that as a volunteer. She's got that. My strengths lie in utilising computer systems, communication abilities, creativity, understanding of finance, fast-paced learning and ability to achieve goals. So that's kind of what she felt was her sort of work skills that she brought apart from the experience. So we rejigged the cover letter, we rejigged her resume, and she started applying, and she had a job within 4 weeks, and she was actually offered a job working in the events team over on Tangalooma. So she kind of had this perfect role. She got to go over to the Tangalooma on Moreton Island every day to do a job, a combination of the island and the head office on the mainland. So, just doing this, writing this stuff well can make a huge difference. We didn't, she hadn't changed. Her experience hadn't changed. We just wrote it. So it was just a much stronger and clearer statement about what she brought to the job, and kind of did that combination thing. Well, she's got 6 years of this. Some of her customer service skills was just doing jobs in fast food stores from when she was younger, when she was a student. But that's valid, fast food customer service is probably a bit like fast food service at events, it's very similar. So that's an example of how to kind of combine things and reword them and kind of highlight the strengths of it. This is another one, sample from a cover letter. This was an extra little bonus bit. This was a cover letter I was doing for a client. She'd worked in a trustee company, and she had some government experience, but she was applying for a role in the state government, and it was in Department of Health, but it was to do with document custody, which she could do very well. Anyway, we were just trying to find a link between what she'd done in the past and government and health. So that's how we did that. This was a little addition, and this was on her cover letter underneath the bullet points. I have worked in the state government in a customer service role and have personal experience with health services because of my son's disability, which also led to my 20 years of volunteer experience within Special Olympics. Now, I put that in a couple of reasons. A, that we wanted to show that she did know what state government was all about because she had worked in there a long time ago. We wanted to show that she had personal experience with the health system because of her son's disability. And I added that 20 years volunteer experience with Special Olympics because I think that's a big deal. Someone who's given that much of their life to working as a volunteer in something really important like Special Olympics, which is for disabled people. That's just said mountains about that person. That she was a really understated woman that you knew if you gave her a job it would be done. She just had that quiet, and people like that who are quiet achievers, they don't know how to blow their own trumpet. They don't know how to say, look, I'm really good at this stuff, because it's just not their nature. So I thought, well, that is evidence of her loyalty and her capacity and her attitude. So we put that in a cover letter. I don't think she got that role. I think she had a conversation about that role, but I don't think it was offered to her. But I guess that's the point with cover letters. The cover letter and a resume will just get you, hopefully, to the conversation. That whole interview conversation is a whole separate skill in itself. And oftentimes the job offer is usually based on the interview. Not always, because sometimes people get a bit nervous in interviews and don't necessarily perform very well, because, again, they're just quiet people and they just get a bit uncomfortable. I think many employers take that into account, so they will still take into account what is on the resume and what's on the cover letter. Like that's the solid information there. The interview performance is also very much about the likability of the person in the room, in conversation. So a final decision about offering someone a job is a combination of the facts, which is your resume and your cover letter, and that your personal attributes. Will you fit in with the company? Do you have sort of the right attitude, positive attitude, easy to get along with? You're not going to come in and make trouble and be critical and whatever. So, those things all go together. Now, the reason I've got this up here, this is just a good way to think about, when you think about yourself and your experience, there's kind of 3 or 4 levels there. So we'll start at the bottom. In a resume and a cover letter and an interview, you can refer to experience at these different levels. So, and they're all valid in different situations. Now, the first one is the bottom level is kind of education. You've learned about it. It doesn't mean that you've done it. So you might say, well, I have got, I've studied that, I've learned that, or I've been educated in that. That's a certain, that's definitely a recognition that you've got knowledge because you've learned about it. So you might have learned about it in school or in TAFE or at uni or in other courses that you've done or through life in general. But you may or may not have used that skill at work. So, you can have, it's a bit like saying, before I was talking about somebody, no, this one here, this is a great example. Okay, 20 years of volunteer experience within Special Olympics. Now, if this lady was applying for a role that required some of the skills that it takes to put together and run Special Olympic events, which are sporting events, she can't say that she's done that in a work. She has never been paid to do that, but she's learned it through life. So that's just as valid as saying that she's done that in a job. So, you might think back through. So there might be something that's required, going back to that job advertisement, Amelia, where you said, what if there's something on the job advertisement that you haven't got? Well, you may never have done it, but have you learned about it? You can go online and learn an awful lot these days. You can go to YouTube and learn a mountain of information. Go to Google. So, don't discount that. You might just find something on YouTube that's a good short course and do that, and then you can say you've got knowledge of it. A great example of that, there's a website called, I never know how to say it properly, but it's Udemy or Udemy. It's spelled Udemy. It's like academy, but with U, Udemy. You can do short courses on that website for $20, $30, and there's some amazing stuff on there. It's an incredible amount of information on there. An example I think of all the time is digital marketing, particularly someone like Amelia, where you've got graphic design skills, and if you like marketing and you like social media, you could go on there and you could do a course, social media marketing for business, and it would maybe cost you $20 and you've done the course. So then, in your cover letter, your resume, you've got that knowledge. You'd say, well, and you would have applied a lot of those skills already when you work with the clients, I imagine. So H is hands-on experience, performed the task directly. So E is where you've learned about it, H is where you've done it. Now again, H doesn't mean you've necessarily done it in a paid capacity. It can be that you've performed the task, but in any capacity. I suppose this is more like, going back to the volunteer experience with special is more like a H, hands-on experience, rather than E, learned about it. T is training. So if you've trained others, that's kind of an elevator. So doing something yourself is one level of capability. A T is kind of a level above that, is when you've actually trained others how to do it. And again, that can be informal. So you might have been in a job or in volunteer work where you had to show other people how to do things. So that's kind of indication, like it's the next level up of ability rather than just doing it yourself. And then the M is for management, is where you've supervised others in that function, not just trained them and showed them how to do it, but you've supervised them in a supervisory capacity. So that's another level of skill or capability. So, say if you're struggling how to articulate something that you've done in the past, just go back to that and think, well, have I just learned about it, or have I performed it, or have I trained others in it, or showed others how to do it, or have I supervised the group teams, in a proper supervisory capacity where you've been recognised as a supervisor. So you can use those terms through your resumes and cover letters to kind of articulate the level that you're at. So I hope that's helpful. And I think sometimes we discount the E part where we've actually learned it. Because we haven't done it, we think it's not valid, but it is. If you've learned it, you've got that knowledge. You may not have performed it, but you know it. So if you're trying to bridge a gap, you might be able to say, well, you want somebody with, I'll just make something up here. You might see a job advertisement that says they want somebody with call centre experience, and you might say, well, I've got real example of using the phone to blah, 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 blah. So you've got the hands-on experience, but you may not have done it. Or I haven't worked in a call centre environment, but I have worked in reception for companies where I've been required to take calls and to transfer them through to the appropriate people, whatever. So, just think about which level you can address at that. Or you might say, well, I haven't got call centre experience, but I've worked in reception where I've had to train new people and show them how to use the telephone system, show them how to answer calls, blah, 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 blah. So, that's a good little tool there to use for yourself to help you figure out how you can describe what you've done. Okay. I'll just check in to see if you've got any questions about that. So, okay, you unmute. Any questions about that little bit? I quite like that little EHTM or MTHE tool there.
Oh, that was good, yeah.
Yep, okay. Cool, keep going. I'll mute you again. Mute. Okay. Right, now we're getting on to what we call the hidden job market. Now, I just have to watch my time because I tend to overload the information I give in this thing. Oh my goodness, I've gone through it now. I didn't realise that. How are we going? I'll just check whether... Are you right to keep going? This is actually quite a long section. I could do this one next week, actually. How's the time going? How are you going with time?
I can give you, say, another half hour.
Yeah, I'm just thinking this is actually quite complicated. No, it's not complicated, but it deserves more time than trying to rush through it.
Do an intro today and then go deeper next week.
Yeah. I'll just explain. We'll go through this slide very briefly, and then I'll catch up and start again with that next week. That's a good idea. Okay, just mute you on. All right. So the hidden job market. Now you will keep hearing this term, I'm sure. Now what that really means is the jobs that are never advertised. So if all you do to find another job is go to Seek over here, Seek or LinkedIn Jobs or whatever, really what you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. That's about 20% of available jobs actually get to the advertised stage. And it's like I said earlier, most companies they don't want to do that because they're throwing their position open to who knows who. They've got to go through that lengthy process of trying to screen people and decide interviews and decide who's best for the job, and they may end up with somebody that can't really do the job after all of that. So most companies prefer to find people through recommendation, and that's, when you say most companies, it's 80%. 80% of companies will be taking on staff who get referred to them, or they may not even be at a position where they've got a vacancy, but someone might come by, or they may meet somebody and they're really impressed with their skills, and so a month later they might say, oh look, I need that person for this job. They give them a call, ask them to come for a chat, they've got a job. That happens all the time. now I'm sure, and you've probably done this yourselves, most people you talk to, if you ask them, have you ever got a job just through referral, word of mouth, where you did not have to apply properly? Pretty much everybody's going to say, yes, that's happened to me. And that, I think I can only recall about one job I've applied for in my lifetime through this kind of process. So most of the jobs are either unadvertised. They're kind of, companies know now that they need somebody, but they haven't got to the point yet where they've advertised for a person. Or jobs, there may be future jobs, like the company hasn't even really got to the point where they've said, yes, we need to put somebody on now. So it's like a future need, like when they know that, okay, if we grow, if our sales increase and we grow, we're going to need somebody probably in 4 or 5 months. So that's a future need. Customised roles, again, there's positions that people get jobs oftentimes where they'll go to a company and they'll say, look, I've read about your company, I know you're expanding, and you probably think you need somebody in administration shortly. I certainly can do administration, but I also happen to have some amazing graphic design skills, marketing skills. So if I worked for you in administration, I could also cross over and give your marketing team a hand when it's needed as well. That's kind of a customised role. And so oftentimes it's the job seeker going to a company and saying, look, I've got this really unusual mix of skills, but I think I'd be really useful because I could help your business in a couple of different areas, not just in one. So as a job seeker, you need to be willing to play in this pool, this 80% pool. What it requires from you, though, is a bit of confidence, because you've got to initiate conversations, follow up on leads, kind of do some strategic thinking and think, well, maybe I could be of use to somebody somewhere in this business. So you've got to be willing to play in that pool. If you're only willing to just wait for a job to come up on Seek, what's happening is you're competing with most other people, because most people, that's what they do. So there's more jobs down in this zone here, and there's less people vying for these jobs in this zone. So it's the zone to be in. So that's what that, and the next slide, when I pick up next week, we'll talk about that in more detail. And on this pyramid here, this top part here is saying that most jobs, most people are applying for jobs on Seek, and what they're selling, most of the time they're trying to say, well, I've got skills, knowledge and experience. Or people are thinking, job seekers are thinking about themselves as all I've got to offer is my skills, my knowledge, my experience. But if you start looking in this zone down here, this 80% zone down here, and thinking, okay, well, I've got certain skills, knowledge and experience, but also what am I interested in? What do I really care about? What sort of company would I love to be working with? If I care about animals, God, I'd love to work with RSPCA now. How could I possibly work for them? And then you do some investigation and you go and find out what sort of jobs exist at RSPCA that people get paid to do. You'd start thinking in this zone down here as well, this section. What motivates me? What's my best fit? If I'm a loner and I don't want to work in a team and I just want to do data entry, but I want to work for a company that looks after animals. Where's that? How am I going to find that job? And you go and ask lots of questions and find that out. So, and this one down here, sort of similar. What do I value? What do I care about? My life purpose. What's my mission? Is my mission? Do I really want to work for a not-for-profit organisation that helps women through domestic violence? That's what I care about. How am I going to find a job that enables me to do that? So you're digging a lot deeper with yourself to find out what really matters to you, and then you're going across to this zone here and think, well, who can I talk to find leads or opportunities that either don't exist yet or aren't advertised at the moment, rather than just sort of playing up here with the Seek, going to Seek and just selling your skills. So that's really where I'll finish off here, and we'll pick up with that point next week. But it's a good thing to think about, this hidden job market. And there's lots of information again about how to do that, and then that's what we'll talk about next week, is how to find these unadvertised roles in the hidden job market. Okay, so I might finish at that point and here stop my